I'm Mike Mazursky, ex-bank robber. My book is Once Upon a Time in Tel Aviv, a bank robber story. I'm chatting with Stacks.
Welcome to this episode of Chatting with Stacks. I'm your host, Bill Stacks, and today I got Mike Mazursky. Once Upon a Time in Tel Aviv, a bank robber's story. What's up,
Hey,
man?
Bill. What's up, brother? Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, no doubt. So
it's my first ever podcast, so I'm popping my podcast cherry over here.
Yeah. People might be wondering why your voice is different, why you're not showing yourself. You want to
right.
Just explain real quick?
Yeah, so where to begin? I wrote this book when I was doing time in Israel. And I got a new life now, a law-abiding life. I'm not living in Israel anymore. I'm living in another country, and I got a new life, legit income, legit job. And people don't know about my past, so I don't want to have my new. I got a second chance at life. I don't want this book, which, I worked hard writing it, and I do want to promote it, but I don't want it to affect everything I've built since getting out and changing my life. You know what I mean?
Totally understand. So where did your life begin? Were you born and raised in Tel Aviv?
No, so I was born in the former Soviet Union, and I was raised in Brooklyn, New York, and we moved over here to the States when I was a little kid.
And what was your early life like?
I come from an educated family, a law-abiding family, Jewish family, hardworking. And, we were always very close, but I was always the black sheep. I was always a mischievous kid, in and out of trouble, looking for adventure, an action junkie from the get-go,
Yeah.
That was just my nature. I don't know where I got it from. It's just, that's how it is sometimes,
And what was your first experience with getting in trouble? Was it your friends that lured you into, like, stealing money?
No, I was actually always the one getting my friends into trouble, so it was the other way around. But one of my earliest experiences in life, actually, I was probably 3 years old. We were actually, this was still in Russia. So I was with my dad and my grandmother. We parked by our building, and my dad got out to help me out of the car, and some drunk stumbled into the car and actually got in the driver's seat. This guy was plastered. It's one of my earliest memories. And my dad grabbed him and pulled him out of the car. And this guy was so drunk out of his mind, he kept trying to get into the car while my dad was just shoving him away, trying to get him away, And I remember I ran out of the back seat. I had a little toy yellow gun. And I ran out of the back seat and I just started doing pow pow noises, pointing this toy yellow gun at this guy's head, And then my mother, she poked her head out the window and was yelling and screaming for my grandmother to get me in the house right away. So that was one of my first memories. I guess that's just some people are just born with something that makes them want, action, adventure, whatever you want to call it.
So you lived in Russia. Where did you go from there when you were younger? Did you guys stay
we moved?
For a long time,
yeah, so we moved when. Say again.
Where did your life go? You were in Russia, and what happened next?
Yeah, so when I was very little, we all moved to New York. I was raised in Brooklyn, and so grew up an American. Just grew up in Brooklyn. I speak Russian fluently as well. A lot of people that I grew up with, they had that. They had that as well. So a lot of guys I grew up with that were immigrants, they also spoke Russian. So this is nothing new. This is nothing unique. Sort of multicultural, if you want to call it that,
Yeah. And was there a lot of mob influence around your neighborhood at that time?
So I grew up in Bensonhurst, which is pretty infamous for that. But when I was there, I was growing up. It was the 90s, early 2000s. So that was, I never really saw that, The neighborhood was very different at that point. I never really saw that. But, later on, I knew about some businesses that were run by some guys. But I was never, had nothing to do with that,
Yeah. So where does your life go there? You grew up in Brooklyn, and where do you go from there?
So, like I said, just, always in and out of trouble, even though I actually never got arrested till I was arrested for my case later on in Israel. So, I was pretty slick for the most part. But just, it started out petty mischief, and then, it escalates, and one thing leads to another. And I was always fascinated I always looked up to stories of like these legendary bank robbers going back to the Dillinger era, going to I don't know if you ever heard of the Stopwatch Gang.
Yeah.
You heard of them? Yeah, it was a Canadian crew. And just there were, other guys as well. But I've always just gravitated to that. And I've always been fascinated by that. Guys that don't hurt innocent people and just sort of them against the world, because I guess with the mob and all that, there's an element of evil and betrayal and treachery and viciousness, whereas these guys it was just sort of, you don't hurt innocent people, you get in, you get the money, you don't live by the rules of society, you're kind of, you're making your own way, it's you against the world, and there's no evil or treachery in it, you know what I mean?
How do you make your way over to Israel?
Well, like I said, my family's Jewish, so there was always that connection. So when I was, early 20s, I knocked over a couple banks, here in the US of A. The statute of limitations expired a long time ago, so it's still weird bringing it up. But, and I was still young, I was living at home with my folks, and my mother, she found like a suitcase full of money in my closet, money along with some other things. And she knew right away, my mother obviously knows me better than anybody, and she knew right away what I was up to. And she made me swear that I would, never do it. Like, she was just in such a panic and so upset. I basically met her halfway, like without actually telling her. I said, you know what, I'm going to stay away from the American justice system. I'm gonna get out of here, and I'm gonna just go on to new horizons. And like I said, there was always that connection with Israel because of, we're Jewish, and I went there for a bit of I went there for a couple weeks at first just to see how it is, and I loved it. The weather was amazing, everything about it I loved. I just, I also researched. This sounds kind of crazy, but I also researched their criminal justice system. They're a lot more lenient, a lot more liberal when it comes to this type of stuff, as compared to America. America will bury you under the jail, give you 20 years or whatever. And Israel isn't like that.
100%. Is there any way you can walk me through the first robbery you committed in the U.S.?
Yeah, it's actually in my book. It's like chapter 1. So I don't know. I don't want to give too much away because I kind of like go through it right in chapter 1 to try to get the reader kind of hooked into that, how it feels and whatnot. So it was just a no job. It was nothing crazy. At first, I was a young kid, so I was scheming about, a takeover and drilling through the ceiling with an acetylene torch and getaway car. And then I realized that doesn't really match with my current skill set. So I said, you know what, let me just walk in, demand the money, and walk out. It was actually anticlimactic. I actually, I don't know, I didn't get the rush. That first one, for some reason, I got a rush, but it wasn't as big of an adrenaline rush as I thought it would be, because I was always chasing that adrenaline rush. Like, I've never done drugs. That's not my thing, but I've just, up until I changed my life, I was always chasing that adrenaline rush, that adrenaline high, And for some reason, this one was actually a little anticlimactic. I'm not sure why. I did it, and then I was just like, well, nothing's changed. Life is still the same. The money was gone after a while. And for some reason, that's how it was. I still don't know for sure why it was like that on the first one. But the other ones later on, I had, crazy adrenaline rushes, and it was just, it's hard to even describe the feeling. But that first one, for some reason, was anticlimactic.
But after you do that first one, are you watching the news or reading the newspaper and like keeping tabs on how the
yeah, I saw a little something. I actually, so I don't even know if I should bring this up. Some things are still weird to talk about, when you're sort of used to keeping things close to the vest. But you know what? maybe maybe I won't bring it. I got an interesting story with that first one. Actually, it's not in the book. I'm still on the fence about bringing it up, man. Old habits die hard. You know how it is, man.
Yeah. Tell me about when you go over to Israel. What's it like when you first get there, and what are your plans?
When I moved there, so Israel has something called Aliyah, which is the law of return. Any Jewish person can get citizenship, with no problem. So I got citizenship, and I joined the army at first. And I met a lot of great guys that I'm still close with today. Some of my closest friends. I had the time of my life, honestly, when I was in the army. I got booted out because I wasn't so good at taking orders. But
isn't it mandatory that you have to join the army when you go?
So yeah, up to a certain age. When I did it, I was at the age where I didn't have to do the full service. I had to do a partial service. But I signed up for more time because I wanted to actually get into a combat unit. And I did get into a combat unit eventually, but I was such a hothead and I was such a wild kid that I just eventually they just gave me the boot. I got sent to army jail a few times, and I wasn't cut out to be taking orders at that time. It's looking back, obviously, as I'm older, I think to myself, obviously, what's important is doing your service and putting your ego to the side. But at the time, I was young, and I just, I was too much of a hothead, and yeah, it's just how it was. I was just back and forth from Israel to America, and just kind of, in a lot of ways, just kind of full throttle in that way of life,
And so what kind of jobs were you doing out in Israel? What kind of robberies were they?
When I ended up going away, they accused me of 7, and then I got convicted of 4. I got convicted of a jewelry store, a bank, and 2 cash exchange stores. So Israel has cash exchange stores all over the place, and it's very common over there. So that was what I was convicted of after I ended up going away.
So you can talk about the ones you were convicted of, right?
I mean, yeah, I could talk about pretty much anything at this point. I did my time. It's all over. Just like I said, the old habits die hard, brother. It's hard to shake old habits sometimes,
So what was the jewelry store robbery like?
That was actually in a central shopping district in Tel Aviv, which is sort of like, I guess, the equivalent. It's not a good comparison, but maybe like Madison Avenue in Manhattan, if you want to take that, like a very exclusive shopping district. Well, I got in. I was watching the place. The angles were perfect as far as getaway, everything like that. And how I did this in Israel was I had a mask. So I used a mask that cost a lot of money. It's like one of the most expensive masks you can get. And when you wear it, you're basically wearing a new face. It's so high quality that you can't even, a lot of the time, you can't tell that the guy is wearing a mask. It's I don't know if you ever heard of these kinds of masks, but they were used in a bunch of movies as well. And it's just so hard.
Like prosthetic, like they're silicone, right?
Something like that. Yeah, this company actually isn't even around anymore. There's other companies out there now, but this particular company, for some reason, is out of business. But it was like the most expensive mask on the market, and you would put it on, it's a whole new face. You can walk down the street, people just think it's some guy walking down the street. So I had a mask of an older guy, older gentleman, bald, so literally the opposite of how I looked. Obviously I was young. So that's how I worked. And I also had these gloves. So I had like old man gloves, and so I could, instead of wearing gloves, which is obvious, you see a guy walking around with gloves on in a Mediterranean country where it's pretty warm most of the time, it raises eyebrows. But so I had these old man gloves that I also bought from the same company. That was kind of like how I went about it. And with the jewelry store, so my plan was